All right, so the last bit for this chapter is basically talking about antimicrobial resistance. So this is defined as a situation in which a microbe, and that could be a bacteria, could be a virus, a fungus, a protozoan, or a helminth, whatever it is, it's not affected by the drug therapy that is intended to inhibit it or eliminate the pathogen. So these resistant microbes sometimes are called superbugs. Sometimes you hear them called superbugs in the news or something like that because they just don't seem to be able to be killed, right? Because they're unaffected by any antimicrobial therapy that we throw at them. And so we noticed that just within a few years of penicillin being used, that there were resistant strains that started to emerge. So whenever an antimicrobial drug is used, no matter how appropriate the use may be, the microbes have an opportunity to develop resistance to that drug. So we've seen an epidemic increase in drug resistance, which has been dubbed in some cases the antibiotic crisis, because it's largely due to the overuse and misuse of antibiotics. Now, we want to be clear about this, that microbes do have a natural inborn resistance in some cases. And this is because, let's say for bacteria, they have qualities that help them to naturally resist antimicrobial drugs. So there's some protection that they have against some of these antimicrobials. So it can make it harder to eliminate them. So for instance, let's say Mycoplasma pneumonia, which causes walking pneumonia, that bacterium lacks a cell wall, and therefore it's resistant to drugs that target cell wall construction. So that's not what we're talking about here, where, there's just not a good fit between the bacteria and the antimicrobial. We're referring to this emergence of resistant strains. So these bacteria were not originally resistant to these antibiotics, and now over time they have gained resistance. All right, so it's kind of this acquired resistance. And so this is genetic based. So it comes from some type of genetic mutation, and that this genetic mutation therefore has been passed on through generations, or it has been acquired by genes that have been transferred between bacteria. And they don't even have to be of the same species. A lot of times there can be the transfer of resistance genes using plasmids. So this is kind of a horizontal gene transfer of the resistance genes. All right, so there's different ways that this can happen. All right, so we're talking about either a new mutation that has arisen or horizontal transfer. And then we have persisters. Persisters are dormant while the antibiotic is present. So they kind of persist and continue on. So that's another way that they can show up as drug resistant, is they're just not taking in the antibiotic at all. All right. So antibiotic resistance is fueled by natural selection. So anytime an antibiotic is used, there's kind of this selective pressure that is applied, and there's potential for resistance to develop. So misuse of antibiotics and not taking the prescribed dosage, like if you're recommended to take the dosage for 2 weeks and you don't take it for 2 weeks, you only take it for 1 week, that can lead to resistance spreading. So the Journal of the American Medical Association at one point said that they believe that about 30% of oral antibiotic prescriptions were unwarranted. 30%. And that could have been due to misdiagnosis, but it also could be in part to people asking for prescriptions when they're not needed and putting pressure on physicians to provide prescriptions, especially if they have a viral infection, and antibiotics certainly would not help with that. So what happens is you have this large population of microbes, and within it there might be one that has had a new mutation that provides resistance, or it might have gained it from horizontal transfer. So those within the population that were exposed to the drug are the ones that are going to get killed. Well, all of them have been exposed to the drugs. So the ones that don't have resistance will be killed, and the ones that do are the ones that are going to survive and reproduce and pass on that resistance to the next generation. All right, so we see populations that evolve to have drug-resistant forms as the dominant species. So this is just a little bit of a visual about antibiotic resistance and how it happens. And so they're showing kind of in gray, well, actually in gray and orange our whole population here of bacteria. And then in orange, we have a few that show the drug resistance. And once again, this could be to a new mutation that has arose when the DNA was replicated and the bacteria were replicating as well. And so now if this population is exposed to an antibiotic, it's going to kill off the majority of the population, but it will leave the two that are resistant to that particular antibiotic. So if those two are left, then they will start reproducing, and now you've got this, the ones that are resistant to the drug are the main members of the population. And here you see another bacteria that is kind of popping in there, and we're seeing that horizontal gene transfer to this other bacteria. All right, so it says some bacteria give their drug resistance to other bacteria. So once again, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same species of bacteria. They can actually share it amongst different species. And so that is how drug resistance starts to spread from one species to another. Now we've got several different species that are resistant to a particular antibiotic. So the way to kind of prevent the spread of antibiotic resistance is to, not use antibiotics when they're not needed, and to definitely take your prescribed dosage over time so that you're not leaving any kind of bacteria behind. And so the rest of this chapter kind of deals with different mechanisms, or I should say different agents that are now being looked at to help target microorganisms that are not antibiotics, and looking at the benefits of probiotics and prebiotics, and looking at bacteriophages as a way to potentially target bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics now. So you can kind of read through those chapters, the rest of the chapter on your own, just to kind of gain some other additional knowledge on some topics that have come up.